They are the most mysterious of beings, gods, angels, aliens, or ordinary men with incredible knowledge and wisdom. Nobody is sure. The culture of Mesopotamia is rich and complex. Historians have been slowly unravelling their secrets. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the many references of them in other cultures, the mystery of the Anunnaki is becoming more clear. To Western eyes, their ways are strange. Over hundreds of years they have been called gods and angels, and now in our modern age many see them as aliens visiting Earth and bringing great knowledge. The truth of their real origin and purpose is much more bizarre and amazing than anything previously believed. Prepare to witness the demystification of a sacred and ancient past. Prepare to see the Anunnaki as they really were, and in so doing, we will discover the truth about so many other things. From the Garden of Eden to the Great Flood, from the God of the Bible to the secrets of Enoch, all shall be revealed. In truth, the Anunnaki are a group of ancient Mesopotamian deities. They are to be found in Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cultures. The exact numbers, descriptions, and roles all contradict each other. According to the earliest Sumerian texts, the Anunnaki were the most powerful of gods in the rich pantheon and were descended from An, the greatest of the gods. Later, they became the 7 judges who sit upon the throne in the underworld. They remain this way for some time, even in the Epic of Gilgamesh. According to old Babylonian texts, they were gods of the underworld, not of heaven. The name simply means offspring of Anu or An, the sky god, and Ki. The most prominent and probably well known of the Anunnaki was Enlil, who cleaved heaven and earth in two. Anu decided to take the heavens and left the earth to Enlil and Ki. Ki is most likely the Sumerian version of the mother goddess, seen in cultures across the globe. The physical evidence of worship of the Anunnaki is scarce. Most of what we know comes to us from texts. It appears that each of the Anunnaki were worshipped separately in individual cults, and because of this, no evidence of them as a group has been found. No image of them all together. As such, the practices of worship of the Anunnaki is thin on the ground. The first mention of them is to be found in the reign of Gudea of the 3rd dynasty of Ur. It is a term used to denote the most important deities of the Sumerian pantheon, the descendants of An. Exactly which deities were members of the group referred to as the Anunnaki is difficult to know. There is no complete list of them that survives. One of the texts mentions 50 or so members of them associated with the ancient city of Eridu. And yet, when we read of the descent of Inanna into the underworld, there are only 7. They are judges who condemn her to death. There is a group of deities known as the Igigi, and they are sometimes confused with the Anunnaki. However, in the poem of Ira, both groups are different. In one flood myth, the Igigi are 6th-generation gods who perform labours for the Anunnaki. However, after 40 days they revolt against their masters, and so Enki, one of the Anunnaki, replaces them with humans. The similarities with the biblical flood and numbers are quite remarkable. It is obvious that Mesopotamian myths heavily influenced or were the origin of much of the biblical Old Testament. In the Babylonian creation text known as the Enuma Elish, the god Marduk divides the Anunnaki and gives them roles. 300 in heaven and 300 on earth. As a thank you, the Anunnaki built Esagila as an abode for Marduk, Enlil and Ea. When they had finished, they built themselves shrines. In later Assyrian texts, they were offspring of Anu and Ki, who were brother and sister, and themselves children of the gods of the celestial poles, and whose heritage stretched back to the original gods Tiamat and Abzu. Here we begin to see clues to the use of these deities as names for the bodies in the sky, the stars that shine above. This, then, is the brief knowledge we have of the Anunnaki. Now we must delve deeper, and to do so we must enter their world. Appearing out of nowhere, and at least as early as the 5th millennium BC, the earliest known civilization, the Sumerians of Sumer in Mesopotamia, was initially a non-Semitic culture. By 3000 BC, and as a result of its sophisticated irrigated agriculture, Sumer flourished as a nation and developed a considerable power base through the development of its numerous city-states like Ur, Erech, Eridu, Lagash and Kish. It is said that the Sumerians invented cuneiform writing and were way ahead of their time, having advanced knowledge in music, poetry, art, mathematics, astronomy, and science. For the ancient Sumerians, music was a tool that helped them describe the cosmos. The Sumerians were later conquered by their long-term rivals, the Akkadians, under Sargon I. The Akkadians were a Semitic people, whose city Akkad was their capital. After 2000 BC, Sumeria Akkad declined as a nation, and was later absorbed by the expanding empires of Babylonia and Assyria. In Sumerian creation myth, the angels, known as the Anunnaki, or great sons of Anu, were the founders of their culture. The names Angel, Anunnaki and Anakim have much in common. They are indicative of the ancient ancestors who brought the secrets to the rest of the world. Interestingly, Anunnaki is phonetically similar to the Hebrew Anakim, the giant race who appear in the story later, and also Angakok, the shaman from Greenland to Alaska. They were known as the Shining Ones. earliest accounts of the Shining Ones can be found in four principal sources. Firstly, in the Sumerian tablets from the Library of Nippur, where they are named the Annunaki. Secondly, in the Book of Enoch, where they are referred to as angels, watchers, and Nephilim. Thirdly, in the Book of Jubilees. And fourthly, in the biblical book of Genesis, where they are given the name Elohim. The Sumerian El is usually translated as God, but the feminine Elohim is the plural of El. In Genesis, the phrase Ah Elohim is also used, meaning the Elohim. El means brightness and shining. Indeed, the Semitic word El is found in many ancient languages. For instance, the Anglo-Saxon elf means shining being, and so El needs to be translated not as God, but as the Shining One, and Ah Elohim, being plural, should read the Shining Ones. We find that this is the most commonly used term in the Old Testament for God, and indeed all other gods, as the scribes even recognized other gods at that time. The name Sumer comes from Shumer and means literally the land of the watchers. It is none other than the ancient biblical land of Shinar, which amazingly means the place of the Shining Ones. The Shining Ones are in the Bible and have been there ever since they wrote themselves in. Elohim is usually translated incorrectly as Lord, and if you read the Bible and replace Lord, and don't forget about the added words, with Shining Ones, you will see a remarkable difference. A reading now of how it was meant to be. We now have the shining light of knowledge, spoken of in 2 Corinthians 4:6. The Lord God of the Bible is the light who gives birth to the divine spark of Christ. A pure reading of the global understanding that God was the basis for illumination, the fire, the sun, the light, and heads of those that shine from that brilliance, the source of intelligence itself. Anu, or An, was the chief sky sun god, and means shining. The Annunaki therefore means sons of the Shining One, or sons of light. In Ireland, the term for shining was Ain. There may be a connection here with the Tuatha De Danann, the Shining Ones of Ireland, and the serpent cult that St. Patrick had removed from the Emerald Isle. Also, there is an unusual, semi-nomadic, bear-worshipping tribe in Japan, known as the Ainu. The Ainu look Caucasian, with round heads, white skin, wavy thick hair, and grey or blue eyes. The Ainu are said to have been living in many of Japan's islands, like Okinawa, for over 7,000 years, and it is said that the Ainu share a language similarity with the Basque, who live in the Pyrenees, the mountains bordering Spain and France. Also interesting is the fact that in these Ainu regions, a number of stone circles have been found with a slender, upright stone in the centre, similar to those found in the British Isles and elsewhere. These Anunnaki, or Shining Ones, were a culturally and technically advanced people who settled in a mountain valley in the Middle East around 8200 BC, and, as their primary concern, established an agricultural centre we now know as the Garden of Eden for the teaching and training of the local tribesmen. They were described as the shining-countenanced lords of cultivation, elevated to gods. Anu and his wife Antu had two sons. Enlil, the storm god, ruled the air and atmosphere, and Enki, the water. Enki is also the wise teacher known as Ea or Oannes, who led the fish beings that came from the sea, or indeed from across the sea. Enki was depicted as a goat with a fish's tail, which became the sign of Capricorn. Enki or Ea's consort was Ninki or Damkina, and their children were Marduk and Nanch. Enlil, also known as Bel or Baal, and whose patron city was Nippur, later ruled in Anu's name. Ninlil or Ninkar-Shag ruled the earth. The early Sumerians described themselves as constantly nourished by the milk of Ninkar-Shag, the great mother moon goddess. The Syrians knew her as Atargatis, the mermaid. The son of Enlil and Ninlil was the war god Ninurtu, also known as Nimrod, and like Horus and as Osiris, he became associated with the star constellation of Orion. We also have Nana, who was the moon goddess, and Utu, a sun god, also known as Ogmash and Shamash. It was Shamash who later given the 29 laws to King Hammurabi. There is also Inanna or Ishtar, who was associated with Venus, as symbolised by the pentacle. The texts that we have on the Sumerian deities vary, In fact, they evolve over time, losing some of their historicity as the story develops, making it more and more difficult to see the origins. Trying to bring clarity to the tales of Sumerian and Mesopotamian deities is like trying to learn Mandarin backwards. However, due to the names we are given, such as Enki for instance, who is identified with Ea and Oannes, we're being led to cross-reference the Anunnaki with the fish beings, who seem to have come ashore in Sumeria from the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf, and at a time which is now lost in antiquity. Indeed, we find that both are the same people, and that the fish beings are also the Anunnaki shining ones, the gods of Sumeria, and the Elohim of the Bible. And when we then cross-reference these fish beings with the Nita gods and the Shemshu or Aku, and whom it is said appeared in Egypt from a submerged island, we also have to include the origins of the Hindu Naga serpent deities, who also came from a lost island. It can easily be concluded that the shining ones of Sumeria, Egypt, and India were really incoming people from a lost or destroyed land. These connections allow us to piece together their story and see a little more of their historical territory, much of which has been lost or deliberately hidden from us. We can see then that these shining ones, who later became worshipped as the Sumerian pantheon of gods and goddesses, seem to have been a dynastic ruling family or clan. Anu, the chief authority, became the universal father god, as a pictograph from his founded city of Uruk, dated to 3000 BC, depicts. The lineages of all these deities are mixed, with sisters, wives, mothers, fathers, brothers and sons, intermingling and confusing the whole thing. Considering the many thousands of years between the composition of these texts and the actual existence of these peculiar peoples or beliefs, this is no surprise. What is clear is that certain deities do continually stand out from the crowd, namely Anu, Enlil, Enki, Ninkershag, Inanna, and Utu Shamash. And that the form and structure of these deities would go on to spawn Egyptian, Greek, and Roman pantheons for centuries, if not thousands of years. No wonder then that the Watchers, the military arm of these Shining Ones, should in later myths be doing battle with the gods of Greece, Egypt and Rome, not to mention the rest of the world. Just as the fallen insurgent Nephilim or Watchers do battle with their own ruling family of Shining Ones in the Bible. Perhaps was depicted as a bull. Enki of people of Atlantis were supposed to have worshipped the bull, which is taking into account the association with deities have with the biblical deluge. It is said that of the Shining Ones, another dimension, like the term king or pharaoh, is passed on. It was also the title of the sun. Suddenly, the great sons of Anu arrived. We could ask why they felt they had to set things in order. Perhaps this order has a global calamity that had destroyed their homeland, according to the accounts. In the famous many thousands of years ago, something catastrophic occurred, and a highly knowledgeable and wise people fled. They eventually landed somewhere in Mesopotamia, where they came across a less developed people. Civilization emerged as the new people taught their new people how to build, mathematics, astronomy, agriculture, and much more. Their wisdom was so great that later generations would call them gods and angels. They had descended from the shining heavenly host, but divisions set in as the two cultures bred and made the bloodline less pure. The Watchers, who had gone bad, and the Shining Ones, who were not happy. In a simple tale that has become very complex over vast periods of time, in our age it is being confused yet further by the addition of extraterrestrial origins for the Anunnaki. There is, however, no need for such imaginings. There is simply a need to understand the time, culture, belief systems, and mind of our very human ancestors.